Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Org3D podcast, Growing Tech Fast. I'm delighted to be joined today by Stephen Hahn-Griffiths. Stephen is Global EVP of Strategy and Growth at the RepTrak company. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Adam, great to be with you. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Really good. So I'll tell you what, can you kick us off by telling us a bit about yourself, RepTrak as well, and also just what you're passionate about as well?
Sure, absolutely. So let me start with me. I'll talk about RepTrak and then lead into my passion. So, put simply, I began my professional career actually living, working, and breathing in the UK. I was destined to become a physician, trained to become a doctor, and then arguably I took what you would consider a sharp left turn into branding. And people often ask me, well, why did that happen? How did that occur? And I said, well, put simply, there's the transference of skills, but it's sort of recrafting of passion in what I was most interested in. And the skills, if you think about it, as a doctor, what do? You basically diagnose patients and you provide prescriptions. You try and make them better. Same is true of brands, right? You basically talk to customers, to stakeholders, to consumers. You understand what's important to them, and you prescribe solutions to the company and their ability to better serve their needs. So there's lots of parallels between science and the artisan aspect of the world of being a physician and how that really translates to marketing and indeed branding and reputation. So that's my sort of short summation of my history. I spent my formative years in the advertising marketing world, working for agencies like Saatchi & Saatchi out of the UK, Leo Burnett globally. And I've been at the RepTrak company now for 10 years. And as you say, I lead sort of strategy and growth here. Put simply, I come with the credentials of being a subject matter expert in reputation. I propagate that knowledge and insight across the entirety of our company in supporting our clients, in talking to prospects, in training our employees. And I guess in many ways, I'm pivotal to helping to understand how to sort of provide best practices in the realm of reputation universally. What am I passionate about? I'm passionate about human behavior. I'm always curious as to what motivates people. You see things in the world, but sometimes some of the hardest questions to answer is why. So why is that? Why did that happen? How do we get to this point? Those kind of questions. And, that curiosity is, leans into an understanding of human behavior and psychology, and lends itself to an understanding of culture, macroeconomic circumstances, and arguably that passion translates to reputation, because in many ways, the answer to the problem is what causes companies to be more successful? Why do people make judgments of each other? How do we drive success in today's world? It's uncanny. The answer often comes back to reputation. So in many ways, my professional career, my personal interests are very much entwined in that regard.
Thanks. Really interesting. I can certainly say understanding human behavior as a recruiter feels like a never-ending mission, basically, at times.
Yeah, not an easy one to do either, because of all the uncertainties. And, sometimes things are explained rationally, and sometimes they're irrational. Sometimes there's emotions in play. Sometimes there are aspects of emotional intelligence that can't necessarily be predicted. All of these are part of the equation of understanding the human mindset.
So we're talking today about brand reputation and how brand reputation specifically influences people's decisions when it comes to employment. So talk to us a bit about that then. So, to what extent and to what impact does a brand reputation have on someone's career choices and where they might want to work?
Yeah, I think arguably it's critical, and it exists on both sides of the paradigm. So from a prospective employee standpoint, or someone who's actively seeking a job and maybe a promotion potentially, what's going to get you that next position is, guess what? Your reputation, right? Your reputation based on your career, what you've accomplished in life, maybe where you went to school or university or college, things you've accomplished along the way, what your personal interests are. I mean, your personal brand is your reputation. So that's important to cultivate, because at the end of the day, what an employee is purchasing in terms of your talent is not you and your ability to do the job. It's you and your ability to help the company to become more successful. And do you fit into that bigger jigsaw puzzle with all the considerations to your personal brand and why it matters? Equally from the employee standpoint, anyone looking to attract the best talent and importantly retain the best talent, What does it take? Arguably, the answer to the question again is reputation, because in many ways, how you're perceived as an employer brand is going to impact my intent to want to stay working with you as an employee. My level of engagement, my commitment, my buy-in to what you stand for as a culture is all predicated on your reputation and what working for you says about me as a human being, and how that is reflected to the world. Equally, my ability as an employer brand to attract the best talent, again, guess what? It comes down to reputation. If you have a stinky reputation, no one's going to want to work for you. If you have a stellar reputation, people are going to go out of their way, in fact, indeed compete for the right to work with you. And think about companies who hold in high regard, you know, in the management consulting world, in the technology space, in the consumer goods and manufacturing lines of business. The companies you seek out are the ones that have a reputation, and ones that not only provide you with career prospects, but give you a deeper sense of fulfillment in terms of what that company stands for, its values. So you feel good about your potential to progress as a professional, as part of your career, but you feel good about the contribution you make to the world and the sort of planet at large, because the sense of virtues and the integrity and the values of that company align with who you want to be as a human being. It's at the cross section of those two things that in many ways defines what is an employer brand, or a brand of high repute for today's marketplace.
Sure. And I guess you're talking here beyond, you know, a company's Glassdoor reviews. You're talking about the media, how they're talked about on social media, in the press. It's much bigger than just what people are saying, right?
Indeed. In fact, I mean, no disrespect to companies like Glassdoor, I'm sure they do a great business in ratings, but you often have to question yourself as to who's providing those ratings, because here's reality. On any given issue, you get a bell curve. You get 20% of people who are positively predisposed. You get 20% of people who are negatively predisposed, and you get the sort of the chunk of the 60% of people in the middle. And often they're not, and many of these sort of sites and rating agencies and ways of capturing sort of online sentiment, you hear the squeaky wheels, the most negative and sometimes the most positive. You don't really hear the views of the people in the middle. So you've got to tread cautiously, not to say they're bad, they're just numbers, and you've got to understand what those numbers represent and who provides the information. But in truth, in today's world, you make your choice based on your own version of the reality. Not artificial intelligence, not deep fake reality, not virtual reality, your reality. And your reality is your perception. And it's important, I think, when you look at things like reputation, you look at it from the eye of the beholder. So let's look at the reputation of any given company through the lens of people who work for your company. So talk to your employees. How do they perceive you and identify with your company? Talk to the prospects, people who are actively seeking jobs and employment in the marketplace that you're trying to recruit. How do they think about you? What about regulators, policymakers, customers, consumers? Everyone has a different perspective, but as you point out, Adam, it's influenced by a number of different triggers. Certainly, social media has become a trigger. Earned media. When I talk about earned media, I mean specifically in the lens of sort of news media channels and digital online forums. That matters. The views of other people who work for the company, that matters. The views of customers. Importantly, the trigger points related to perceptions that transcend the enterprise, but maybe tie back to things like sustainability and the so-called ESG phenomenon that we've seen arise in the last 3 to 5 years. And I can go on. All these are triggers. And they're consequential to influencing your reputation. But in many ways, with all that considered, your reputation is the ultimate consequence of everything anyone's ever said and done. And so you as a human being, when asked to represent the reputation of any given company and asked the question, would you be willing to work for this organization? You're emotionally, mentally, rationally, viscerally interpreting all that information, reaching a conclusion in your mind, and this is where it comes back to human behavior, and expressing your opinion. And guess what? That's the only one that matters. Not someone else's, not what is being written, not what you've read, but what you think about. And so that's the viewpoint we need to understand. So if you're a chief human resources officer or chief people officer, whatever your title is in the realm of talent management, you could ask the question, what do the people I'm looking to actively recruit think and feel about our organization? If you don't have that perspective, it becomes a lot more challenging to attract the best talent.
Okay. So on that note there then, how can HR, execs, CPOs, how can they tap into that sentiment and then use that to build better teams ultimately? You know, and feel free to talk about RepTrak here and how you guys do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, in a way, you could guess and make an educated series of decisions and use your own experience and what other people think is true. And that can work for certain companies. But I'd argue it'd be a little better if you had like reputation intelligence, like some form of data, some form of research to help guide your decisions and inform ultimately the choices you make. So, you know, RepTrak, this is what we do. Obviously, we serve the needs of the C-suite, specifically, you know, chief human resource officers and chief people officers use our services to help them understand how best to speak to and position their companies. And a lot of this is about communication in terms of how you tell your story, but also a lot of this is about the actions your company take. And I'll give you an example. Real client we work with, I'll avoid using their name publicly, but let's just say they are in the realm of being in this sort of technology consulting space, right? Global company operates in scores of different markets. And they came to us and said, look, we got a reputation problem. We can't attract enough of the best talent to work for our company, specifically millennials, because they come for job interviews and we try and recruit them. And we get into conversations about the great products we have and how innovative we are as a company and the great workplace culture we create. And they look at us and they kind of tune out and they say, well, that's all well and good, but what are you doing to make the world a better place to live? And people are shocked, like, well, what do you mean? I mean, the onus on you as an employer is to tell your whole story. And today's story transcends the products and services you make and the performance you deliver and taps into sort of nuances around your conduct, the aspect of good citizenship, indeed, perceptions of your leadership. And so the company we work with in the technology consulting space came to us and said, yeah, all we need to do is tell our story around, we've got great products and services, we're the innovative leader in our space, and we deliver incredible earnings based on financial performance. Help us understand how we get the story out. And we said, wait a minute, are you sure that's what people want to hear about? Let's go and talk to people actively job seeking in the market and see what they say. So you've got 7 drivers of reputation, and this is at the heart of what RepTrak does. Products and services, innovation, workplace, conduct, citizenship, aspects of leadership, and performance. So we asked the question, how you view the company. We conduct calculus and data science, and we derive the answer as to what is the single most important thing you can talk about relative to your company. Of the 7 drivers, guess what was number 1? It wasn't products and services. It wasn't innovation. It wasn't workplace. The answer was leadership, right? You're making a big decision as to who to work for. You're asking the question, who's leading the charge? When that rally cry comes and they say, take the hill, let's go together and go steal market share from the competition, are people going to follow you? Do you have a compelling leader that's going to help guide your future, inspire your next stage of career, and someone you can identify as a figurehead and a mentor? Because in the technology space, that's arguably very important. So for this particular company, it required a complete rechange in strategy, repurposing the entire website, recasting of their entire talent management story, and putting the leader of the company front and center as part of the recruiting effort. Because who do you want to follow? Not the company, you follow the leader.
So which makes the bigger case of personal branding versus the company, right? That makes
exactly. So the personal brand, the reputation of the CEO, elevated the credentials of the company's reputation as an employer brand. So therefore, you as a potential prospect thinking about where to work, which of all the world-class companies I'm going to join today, you're seeking the company that has the most inspiring leader. So that was a huge insight, completely changed the paradigm of how the company started talking about itself. Recruiting efforts have increased exponentially in the past 2 years. And they're now the #1 employer brand of choice because they understood what the people they want to attract care about. While the competition is doing, guess what? They're talking about products and services, about innovation, about financial performance. Not to say nobody cares, that's important, but the most important thing was understanding the leader. And that's how we can bring insight to bear and how companies can retool their strategy to be relevant to the market they serve.
Okay, interesting. So most people you're helping, most companies, most leaders you're helping, is it sounds like companies like that who maybe there's not a crisis there, right? It's not like there's been an oil spill and nobody wants to work for said oil company. Is it more a case of they just haven't really defined the pull factors to them as a business, or is there a bit of reputation management in that case in some quite extreme scenarios?
Yeah, it's actually right across the board, Adam. It was interesting. We have, going back to my sort of paradigm shift
Mm,
from medicine into branding and
mm,
reputation, we have some sick companies we're working with, no disrespect, and I won't publicly cite them, but they need help. They need
mm,
perspective of how to boost their reputation and retool their offering and their storytelling.
mm,
And then we got the majority of the companies are kind of in the middle. They're kind of like, yeah, they're okay. They're respectable. They're above average, well regarded, but maybe not setting the world on fire, more like steady Eddie kind of companies.
mm,
And then, of course, we have rising stars leading the way, setting new paradigms, progressively going into sort of new ventures and new exciting realms of
mm,
possibility. So it's right across the board, and that's the whole point about reputation.
mm,
It's actually relevant to everybody, but what varies is how you choose to execute against it, right? How do
mm,
you choose to craft the most compelling stories that position you in a unique space and ultimately allowing you to accomplish your goal? And that's
mm,
part of the challenge and opportunity, is knowing how to unleash the power. Begins with, it's probably the single most important question, is whom are you trying to influence?
mm.
Like, who's your stakeholder of choice? What are you trying to accomplish here is predicated on who you want to attract. And from there, that's where you start to build strategy.
Mm, okay. And how, like, if you were to speak to 100 HR execs, CPOs within multinational firms, how many of those do you think are this is on their agenda? How many of those do you think are really aware that they need to work on their brand reputation versus those that think that, probably quite complacent? Yeah, we've got a decent brand here. How many are actually really addressing this as an issue within their business?
Yeah, to give you a point of reference, excuse me, we tend to be most successful in attracting the sort of Fortune 2000 companies,
Mm,
those big multinationals who have most to lose when it comes to talent
mm,
recruitment. And what they're looking to do is lower operating costs by most efficiently attracting the best talent possible. So
mm,
they understand reputation is important. The challenges they face is, one, they often don't have the budget to do the kind of work that we're talking about.
mm,
So often they partner with the chief communications officer. They piggyback
mm,
off existing reputation research, and they use that as kind of like a proxy for understanding their reputational challenges as an employer brand. Um, so they know it's important, but often they're not, beyond not having the tools and the resources. The challenge that exists internally is that there's an employee engagement issue in play, and there's a talent attraction issue in play, and those two things are often at odds,
mm,
right? Keeping enough of the right talent inspired while continuing to replenish the talent pool with new acquisition opportunities is actually two jobs. They sound very
mm,
similar, but actually require different skills. So trying to bifurcate that effort and making sure you have internal resources to do both simultaneously, because it's neither one or the other. You have to make both of those happen. So often, because of that, people leading human resources organizations and talent management roles are stretched with that
mm,
endeavor. And then there's other things that often go above and beyond the role of being a talent manager. Sometimes we put HR people into positions where they're leading the sense of purpose for the company. They're the tip of the spear in telling the story around human values and culture. And that creates added pressure. So I think it's fair to say that based on our understanding, nearly everyone would say reputation is important.
mm,
I think most people have some kind of program in place, some kind of measurement system, not always ideal, but there's still probably a significant majority of companies that are still yet to make that link between reputation and employer brand.
mm,
And it's no big surprise. Those who are leading the way in reputation management are the most attractive employer brands. Why? Because they figured it out. They know how to tell the story. They know how to activate their brand to yield competitive advantage. Work in progress exists amongst those who are kind of late to the game and they don't fully unleash the power of reputation yet, at least
mm,
not just yet.
mm. Okay. Well, we're coming up on time shortly. I guess a final question for me really would be um, whether it's a large global company, whether it's a mid-market business, whether it's a 10-person a local business, a restaurant, whatever it is, what advice would you give quite generalistically to help people be thinking about their employer brand and how to do a better job of attracting and retaining?
Yeah, I wish there was a silver bullet that would equally apply to everybody, but unfortunately there isn't. But there is a common practice, which is, telling a story begins on the inside and then out, right? So that's probably consistent whether you are owner of a small-time car repair service or whether you're running a big multi-billion-dollar corporation. The people who work for you kind of represent the story you want to tell. And making sure they're feeling inspired and excited and passionate and committed and aligned with your values and what you're trying to accomplish. That in itself will promote and exude a sense of reputation, even without communicating anything, because you're starting to build a sense of culture. And culture in today's world is a differentiator. So maybe don't start the storytelling and the essence of how you position your brand and your reputation with these sort of tangibles of, even if it's down to leadership or innovation or products and services or something else, maybe start by telling the story, by defining your values, by imbuing your culture, in representing a way of conducting yourself that is attractive to other people, because happy workers attract more happy workers. Birds of a feather flock together. And there's lots of euphemisms I can use to characterize the phenomenon. But if at the core, you have happy, engaged employees working to their heart's content at the core of your organization, it will become contagious and attract other people like that. So maybe that's the lesson learned. If you don't have the budget to communicate on reputation, build a culture that would imbue one, and through the ether, that would engage and attract and excite more people who want to come and work for your company.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Well, it's been a really insightful conversation. I think it'll resonate with a lot of our listeners. So thank you so much for joining us today, Stephen. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure to be here. And if anyone wants to know more about our company, it's RepTrak, RepTrak.com. We'd love to have you come and meet with us and continue the conversation.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Let us know your thoughts in any comments, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or if you listened on Spotify. Let us know what your thoughts are and your experiences with going through reputation management in the context of hiring and retaining talent. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Keep well.